The Torture Factory, a secret history of the Tower of London. The Tower of London, a majestic fortress on the banks of the Thames, home of the crown jewels, guarded by the iconic Beefeaters. For 1,000 years, it has stood as a symbol of royal power in British history. Forget the postcard. Forget the tourist trap. You're about to discover the tower's real purpose. This wasn't a castle. It wasn't just a prison. This was a factory. A meticulously designed factory of pain, where the raw material was a human body, and the finished product was absolute terror. You're about to learn the secrets they don't tell you on the official tour, about the machines designed to shatter bone, the psychological traps that broke mind before bodies, and the botched, horrifying executions that were less about justice and more about sending message. This is the real story of the Tower of London. The torture began before they ever touched your body. It began with a boat ride to one of the most infamous doors in history, the Traitors Gate. This wasn't a grand entrance. It was a dark, wet archway opening directly from the river, designed so prisoners could be smuggled in without the public seeing them. But here's the truly sick part. The gate was a psychological weapon. As you floated through that arch, you would see the severed heads of recently executed prisoners impaled on spikes on London Bridge, rotting in the sun, their eyes picked out by crows. It was a promise, a welcome message from the state. This is where you are going. This is how your story ends. Before a single question was asked, your mind was already broken, flooded with the certainty that you would never leave this place alive. The terror was the first tool they used, and it was brutally effective. You think you know what torture is. You don't. Inside the tower, they perfected machines of agony that would make a modern horror movie director sick. Let's start with the most famous. The rack. This wasn't just a stretching device. It was a human disassembly table. Your ankles and wrists were tied to rollers at opposite ends of a wooden frame. The torturer would then turn a handle, slowly, methodically, pulling your body apart. You would hear your own ligaments snap like twigs, your joints dislocate with a sickening wet pop, and your spine begin to separate vertebra by vertebra. Most victims would confess to anything long before the final, agonizing tear. But what if the rack wasn't working? They had something else. Something you don't learn about in history class. It was called the Scavenger's daughter. Where the rack pulled you apart, this device crushed you together. It was an A-frame of iron. Your head was forced down to your knees, and the frame was tightened, compressing your body like a piece of trash. The pressure would shatter your ribs, break your spine, and force blood to pour from your nose, ears, and even your eyes. The choice was yours, be pulled apart or be crushed into a ball. This was a science of pain, perfected in the name of the crown. The most terrifying torture at the tower wasn't always the most violent. Sometimes it was the quietest. Deep within the fortress was a cell known only as Little Ease. This wasn't a normal cell. It was a space so small, less than 4 feet square, that a grown man could not stand up, lie down, or even sit comfortably. You were forced into a permanent, agonizing crouch. For days, for weeks. Imagine it. Complete darkness. The constant drip of water. And a body forced into a position that creates unbearable, escalating pain in every single joint. Your knees would swell, your spine would lock, and your mind would begin to unravel from the claustrophobia and the unending agony. There were no screams, no blood, just a slow, quiet, methodical destruction of a human being. Many prisoners who survived Little Ease were driven permanently insane. If you survived the interrogations and were sentenced to death, your ordeal wasn't over. It was time for the final performance on Tower Hill, and often it was a horror show. The executioners were not always skilled professionals. They were often common criminals who were offered a pardon if they took the job. Take the case of Margaret Pole, the 67-year-old Countess of Salisbury. When she was brought to the block, she refused to lay her head down, insisting she was no traitor. The amateur executioner panicked. He chased the elderly woman around the scaffold, hacking at her with his axe. It took 10 brutal, botched blows to finally kill her, turning the platform into a slaughterhouse in front of a horrified crowd. This wasn't an accident. It was a feature of the system. A messy, terrifying execution sent a far stronger message than a clean one. It was a factory's final, bloody advertisement. Defy the crown, and this is the undignified, brutal end you can expect. So there you have it. The real Tower of London. Not a palace, but a production line of suffering. A place where fear was a tool, pain was a science, and death was a public spectacle. The ghosts that are said to walk these halls aren't just stories. They are the psychic stains left behind by centuries of unimaginable cruelty. The Tower of London wasn't built to protect the crown jewels. It was built to break human beings. If you want to uncover more of the dark secrets hidden behind history's most famous landmarks, hit that subscribe button, because the dungeons have plenty more stories to tell.